everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and
it is happening again.
a non-Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube personality has once more waded into our hobby, and it's my job as the emissary of gatekeepery to annihilate them with facts and logic. Today's video concerns British YouTuber Pleasant Kenobi, who is well known for uploading both Magic the Gathering and Warhammer videos. Why his YouTube name is Pleasant Kenobi and he doesn't upload Star Wars content, I'll never know.
Liar!
But who would ever do something like that?
Please don't Google what MBT is short for.
Anyway, a Disney Plus original series Obi-Wan Kenobi uploaded yesterday a video called Scumbag or Genius When Tokens Get You in Trouble. And in the thumbnail, the text says Yu-Gi-Oh! Would have banned him. By the way, quick word about the thumbnail. I appreciate that Mr. Kenobi has the exact same disease I do, which makes you irrevocably addicted to Drop Shadow. Anyway, this video is a discussion about a play made by one of the greatest of all-time Magic the Gathering players, Luis Scott Vargas, and its implications on a play made by one of the greatest of all-time Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, Torres. It discusses Torres' suspension from Yu-Gi-Oh! And if LSV's comparable play would have earned him a suspension were he playing the superior card game. This video is incredibly interesting, and I urge you to watch it. There will be a link in the description. I'm going to be talking about my perspective on his perspective as someone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! So with that, let's jump into the video proper. Our resident Baby Yoda enthusiast begins by examining the Andres Torres video, and we'll just watch a quick second of that.
Listen again and try to ignore the fact there's a Nintendo Switch on the side for some reason. I don't really understand that.
I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but just a couple of quick nitpicks. Firstly, the Nintendo Switch is on the table because it's his prizing. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments don't reward you with money for winning. I know to my Magic the Gathering playing audience, this probably sounds ridiculous, and don't worry, it's ridiculous to us as well. We don't actually know the reason why this is, but we're pretty sure it has something to do with the fact that the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has made a couple of public statements about how playing card games for money seems like something that gangsters would do, and he wanted it to be fun. So what Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments reward you with is other high-value items. Prize cards that are worth a ton of money on the secondary market, hardware like Nintendo Switches, and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games for those aforementioned consoles. Second thing, Anakin Hater talks about how Torres ate a year-long suspension for this interaction, which is not true. Torres was actually banned for 2 consecutive 6-month periods. The first for executing the rules violation that's discussed in this video, and the second for playing a sanctioned event while banned. That one was just a miscommunication via a game of telephone and was walked back, meaning that he has since been reintroduced to organized play and is topping events once more. So what specifically happens in this video? Well, Andres Torres is a household name among Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. He's one of our greatest duelists of all time. He has won almost more YCSs than any other individual person, and in a deck profile for a deck called Branded Despia about a year ago, he says this.
Just some tokens, you put these on top, they think that you're playing with Sword Hope.
We'll get into the why later, but spoiler alert, this is a violation of Konami's organized play guidelines. This is also not a new violation of Konami's organized play guidelines. There's a history to this violation. Back in the day when extra decks were looser, individuals would put a Gladiator Beast Geysers on top of their extra, accidentally leave it face up before flipping it face down as the game began, to make their opponent think they were playing Gladiator Beast instead of what they actually were. It's further complicated by the fact that there's no printed Sword Soul token. It's not like he just cracked open a pack and threw it into a list that could theoretically get Nibiru'd. He had to actively seek out someone who had constructed a Sword Soul token using here the art from Sword Soul of Taya and then put it into his list. This type of intent analysis is the cornerstone of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s rules document, which is a great segue to... So, real quick background about me. I make content exclusively about Yu-Gi-Oh! I play it for hours and hours a day, despite my better efforts on stream. And while I haven't done it at an event for a long time, I did pass the judge test way back in the day and get entered into the judge program. That said, I was a kid when Yu-Gi-Oh! First came out, and I didn't really start playing competitively until my brain finished developing at about the end of Dragon Ruler format. And there have been some organized play updates in that time that I am not 100% up to snuff on, so do take this discussion with a bit of a grain of salt. Prior to the time I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, I played a lot, and I mean a lot of competitive Magic the Gathering. Coming from a competitive Magic the Gathering to a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Background is a pretty stark contrast. A lot of shit that flies in Magic the Gathering games would not fly in Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic the Gathering's angle shooting is basically the equivalent of our legal cheating. I went to a ton of Magic the Gathering events where, after presenting lethal on board, my opponent would start asking things like if I had extra cards in my deck box, if they could get a deck check, if they could count the amount of cards that I had in rotation, if I had drawn any extra cards, and we would reverse engineer game states to prove that I hadn't. I would never get mad about this kind of thing because that's just what you had to do. Sometimes you fished for a win. And that mentality, largely professed by a significant amount of professional players early in Magic's history, bled directly into early competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Non-Konami tournaments, be they UDE events that occurred before Konami assumed control of the card game in 2009, or events hosted by third parties like Alter Reality Games, were frequently dominated by personalities who were adept at sleight of hand, angle shooting, or just being very convincing. A lot of the macro-level mind discussions found in Patrick Hoban's Road to the King that a lot of individuals found either appalling or a little scummy are one-to-one translations from real things Magic the Gathering professional players advocated. And since about 2014, when I entered the world of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu-Gi-Oh!'s rules document has done something very interesting to combat this phenomenon. They have added an element of intent to almost every rules violation possible. To my understanding, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the first major card game that's attempted to tiptoe around things that are lawful but awful, and for the most part I think they've done a really good job. Just as an example, a significant amount of their gameplay violations have what I would probably refer to by the legal concept of a mens rea, a guilty mind. There's an intentionality concept found in both the cheating subpoint under H and the unsporting conduct subpoint under G. Here's the relevant portion of the cheating subpoint. Cheating includes but is not limited to intentionally misrepresenting the game state, rules, or tournament policies. It also includes a provision by which the head judge will investigate a person suspected of cheating, and if the head judge believes the person has cheated, they will issue a disqualification, followed by the KDE penalty committee reviewing the incident and determining if additional penalties are required. In the case of Torres' suspension, while I don't want to speculate as to what the head judge and the KDE penalty committee's consensus was, it seems pretty clear-cut. Torres describes in the deck profile that he intended to mislead his opponents as to what deck he was playing. That intentionality here is critical. With that, let's examine LSV's play. So a little bit of background about this player. Luis Scott Vargas is one of the greatest Magic the Gathering professionals of all time and has remained so pretty much for his entire life. Unfortunately, in the process of researching this video, I found out that he's now a blue check crypto guy, which for all of my viewers that didn't grow up watching and idolizing professional Magic the Gathering players is kind of like finding out that Santa Claus is in Epstein's Black Book. Here's the play that he executes. In the semifinal round of Pro Tour,
One of the Ravnica sets.
LSV conducts his turn in a very strange way. On his side of the field, he has a land that theoretically can produce a token by expending 3 mana. He orders his lands in such a way that 3 of them are in one pile, and the land that could theoretically produce a token is in another, implying that he will use its ability to produce a token when his opponent goes to combat. While his opponent is determining combat math, LSV counts along, doing a little bit of mental calculation in order to figure out if he's actually dead. At one point, he goes over to his empty deck box and pulls out a token, examines it for a second, and then puts it back, subtly implying that he intends to use the token-producing effect of the land. His opponent, playing off of this cue, attacks with everything, expecting that he needs to hit with as much as possible. LSV then reveals that he has been bluffing. He does not intend to use the token-producing effect of the land at all, instead has an effect that's analogous to Mirror Force waiting in his hand for the low cost of all of his mana. This wins him the game on the spot. So, is this play illegal by Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards? I, personally, were I judging this event, would probably not penalize LSV. But it's very close. I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable making a decision on my own and would request a discussion with the head judge before I proceeded, but if I had to, I probably would let him roll with it. So why is this? Let's re-examine what we've discussed already. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You are not allowed to intentionally mislead your opponent or misrepresent the game state. For the Yu-Gi-Oh! Players in the audience, this means you can't count along with summons to misrepresent Nibiru, nor can you ask your opponent, have you activated any monster effects this main phase, with the intention of misleading your opponent into thinking you have a triple tactics talent. But in this play, LSV isn't misrepresenting the game state, he's misrepresenting his own decision-making process. Spending 3 mana to make a token with the effect of his land is a legal play. It's a defensible play if he doesn't have access to settle the wreckage. Sure, it's not a great play, but it keeps him alive, and if he's got a significant amount of blowouts in his deck, playing to top deck 1 isn't the worst thing in the world. Let me try and give you an analogous example using GOAT format. Your opponent has 5 monsters on their side of the field, each one of which represents a lethal attack to your life points. Because of a trap dust shoot activated earlier in the game, they know that you have a copy of Scapegoat in your hand. You draw for turn, and what do you know? It's Mirror Force, a card that will instantly turn the tide of this game. You set 1 card and pass. Before your opponent enters the battle phase, you make a subtle hand motion over to your deck box, which includes 4 Scapegoat tokens you would theoretically be summoning if you were to flip the quick play spell. Based off this cue, your opponent spends a second thinking before they go to the battle phase. They had been debating whether they wanted to switch one of their monsters to defense position. If you'd drawn a blowout like Mirror Force, they could effectively play around it by leaving a monster back. But if they had the read that the only card you had in the back row was Scapegoat, keeping all monsters monsters in attack means they get in for lethal this turn and don't have to risk you drawing a card like Darkhold. In the end, your hand motion inspires them enough confidence to read that the card that you have set is Scapegoat. They go to the battle phase, attack directly into a mirror force, and lose the game. I don't think a Yu-Gi-Oh! Judge would feel comfortable issuing a penalty in that scenario. But like I said, it is close. If instead of reaching for your deck box, you grab a stack of Scapegoat tokens and start meticulously looking at them, well, that changes things. If you look at the set card and say, oh my god, my Scapegoat doesn't prevent you from killing me, well, that's probably not okay. And if in your deck profile you say, I don't even own Scapegoat tokens, I was just looking at my deck box to misrepresent the game state in violation of the rules, then you should probably not be allowed around cameras. Yu-Gi-Oh! Tries to walk a very fine line with regards to mind games. Refusing to activate a hand trap at the optimal point you saw in a YouTube video in order to induce your opponent into thinking you don't have it, just to drop it at a devastating time later in the turn once they've ceased to play around it, is an incredibly popular tactic. Certain decks can absolutely obfuscate their hand by playing out the turn completely differently relative to what's in their grip. Rescue Ace, for instance, can misrepresent a brick by going for a low-impact normal summon while you have a copy of the field spell in hand. But the game tries very hard to eliminate the shitty, scummy, feels bad, mental warfare in the landscape of the mind. You should have declared that you were remanding the spell that's being cascaded into rather than the spell that has Cascade printed on, bullshit that Magic occasionally allows. And for each one of these incredibly skillful plays that LSV executes that Yu-Gi-Oh! Might not permit, there's about 15 to 20 just active cheats that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules cover more effectively. So that's where I come down on this. Again, this is just my opinion. As someone who hasn't judged in a long time, I cannot guarantee this is how it would go down in paper. But I feel pretty confident that he'd be fine. I'll also take any opportunity to show off the intent portion of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulebook. I think it's really cool. So that's that. If you think it would shake out differently, or you disagree with my understanding of the situation, let me know in the comments section below, and I will not read it. Unless you're a channel member. Bye-bye.